we had basically thought of everything that we wanted to do except a name. And that was the difficult part. We just couldn't find a name. So the first thing that I would say to founders is be really intentional about the name that you want your organization to have. I think sometimes we take that very lightly, but a name is almost always the first point of contact that people have when it comes to your brand. And it is what will be on top of people's mouth or tongues. So you really have to think about the kind of association that they have, that you want your audience or customers or stakeholders to have whenever they think about your name or whenever they say your name. So that requires a great deal of intentionality, and with that, it requires some time. You need to spend some time thinking about your name. And I remember that's what we did. We were supposed to be a podcast, or we were starting a podcast. That was what Youth for 12 was at that time. And so we were thinking of a name in the context of a podcast. And so I remember, starting to think of ideas of names that would be unique and all that. But the whole process was just a process that had intentionality. It's something that we were praying about, something that we were thinking about, that we were ideating on. I spent a great deal of time thinking about the right kinds of names that would suit what we wanted to do. One thing that I was thinking about when thinking of a name for the brand was the identity of the brand, who we were, who we wanted to be, and our mission. So the thought was the name has to represent what we stand for, or who we are, and what it is that we want to do. So a name needs to somehow be able to carry your brand's identity. It must not be disassociated from who you are and what you do, or what your values are. In some way, shape, or form, your name has to represent your identity. I think that is a very important part. And so when I was thinking about a name personally, I was thinking of a name that would resonate, with young people, a name that would represent that we are for young people. We are young people as well, and we are reaching out to other young people, and a name that would represent what we wanted to achieve, who we wanted to be. And perhaps the third thing that I would advise is find inspiration from somewhere. I remember that I really searched the Bible to find some sort of inspiration, because it was a Christian podcast. And so when you are ministering to Christians, you want a name that will be able to easily resonate with your target audience. And so that was my process. I looked at the Bible, kept on praying, and also just checking out some podcast names that were targeted at young people. I couldn't really find anything much, but I think what really helped a lot was looking at the Bible, because eventually the scripture of 1 Timothy 4 verse 12 came, and it was really by divine revelation, if I must admit, because it's not a verse that that was on top of my mind. Though I knew it wasn't a verse that I kept on always thinking about. So I remember that it was nighttime, and I was looking through scripture, and I'd been ideating for a few days, and then it came, 1 Timothy 4 verse 12, that don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for believers in conversation, conducting in spirit and love, faith and purity. And clicked right there that this verse encompassed everything that we wanted to stand for, what we wanted to be. I looked at it, I was like, yes, this is what we want to be. We want to be this kind of youth, this kind of young people. This is what this brand is about, shaping this kind of youth, youth that will be an example to other people. We want to be that youth which is an example to other people. And I remember what sold it for me was in conversation, because that was what we were doing. That was what we were doing through the podcast. And so it really fit in with the identity of what we wanted to be, the youth of 1 Timothy 4 verses 12. And it was almost like a mathematics equation at that point, youth of 1 Timothy 4 verse 12, youth for 12. I really thought that this name was really unique. I thought it was original when it came, to me. But I had to check, and this is what I would advise other founders and people who are starting a business organization to do a test. Firstly, check Google if there are other organizations which have the same name that you are gunning for. Two, check social media. So check the availability of handles, because there's nothing that is worse than having to add 1, 2, 3 or whatever for your name, and thirdly, check your domain name. So I firstly did a podcast check. So I went on the podcast directories and checked if there were other names which other podcasts which were using this name. Fortunately, they weren't many. It was just a few, and they had 412 youth. So I thought that there was a distinction there: youth 412, 412 youth, 412 ministries, and things like that. So I thought there was a clear distinction there, And also when I checked on Google, there weren't really any, organizations which had this name. And so that is what sold it for me, because you have to think about this. My name is Lindo. And here at home, no one else is Lindo. So when I'm being called, I will easily respond, and I know they're calling me. But in public, whereby I'm not the only Lindo, more often than not, when my name is called and I react or respond, sometimes they're not calling me, And that's what you have to think about, that when your customers are looking for you, and they are looking for your name on Google, on social media, will they find your name, or will they be other people who share the same name, and your organization or brand will get drowned out by those other organizations or brands, And it's particularly worse if you have big brands or organizations which share the same name as you, because more often than not, you will get drowned. Firstly, you won't even find a domain name, which is very important, for your websites and so on and so forth. Because of the uniqueness of our name, we were able to, get domains youth412.com and even on social media, on YouTube, where the at youth412 was available. It was not a highly contested name. So you have to really think about having a name that will set you apart, not just for the sake of uniqueness, but for the sake of being discoverable, because you don't want to get drowned out by other brands, by other organizations when people are looking for you. When they look for you, they have to be able to easily find your brand and organization. I mean, one thing that makes me proud is that when you search for our name, more often than not, you will find it ranking at the top on Google search, also on the other social media platforms, and podcast directories and things like that, which shows that we're able to choose a name that sets us apart. So another thing that you have to think about, which I really think is important, is how will people or how will your audience members say this name? How easy will it be for them to say it, for them to share it, for them to write it on their social media, for them to search it and things like that. You have to make that experience as easy as possible. When people are sharing about your brand, it has to be easy for them to share that they found this content from Youth 412. It has to be easy on the tongue. It has to be easy to think about and to write, memorable. It mustn't be like, oh, I forgot, or Babs, what are they again? What is this again? And to be honest, we've had that experience with many people who struggle to say our name and who don't know, who misspelled it and things like that. But the good thing is that it was adults, people who weren't part of our target audience, but it's a much easier name to say for our audience. But one thing that I was really worried about is if it would make sense from face value. Like someone who did not know or does not know who we are, when they look at us, will they know what it is that we stand for? And I was really worried about that. And to a certain point and extent, I really believe that when people look at our name, they don't get it. They might not get what we are, what we stand for. The good thing is that it has youth. So one way or another, that makes sense. Somehow, this has to do with young people. So for that, I think we get 10 points. But in terms of the number itself, it does not necessarily give off, or is not as direct as perhaps you may want it to be. Although it does create some sort of curiosity gap in the minds of the people. They know it has to do with youth, but what is it about, when it comes to youth, which can work in favor of the brand. But I think what makes our brand unique in that sense is that the number itself, or Youth 412, is not just a brand, but it is a movement, and so it is our actions that give meaning to the name. So even if people don't know what it means, but it's through what we do that shows that, okay, this is what it means, So ultimately, it is your actions as a brand that gives meaning to your name. Even if your name might not be a name that makes sense in the minds of people, just like Google, just like Nike and all that, but through their actions, through their consistent quality and all that, that is what gave meaning to those brand names. And now today, when you say Google, it means something. When you say Nike, it means something, to its audience. And so because of how we reached out to our audience and the spaces that we were able to create with our audience, it became something that started to carry some sort of meaning, to the audience, that, okay, this is who we are, and when you do explain it to people, it makes sense. It makes sense because through our actions, this has added meaning, or has confirmed or affirmed the meaning, So ultimately, it will be your actions which then give meaning to your brand name. The bonus tip here would be to think about scalability as well. I spoke about location and things like that being drowned out and all that. If you want to remain local, maybe in your region or community and things like that, and there are other names, other people who use the same name and all of that, but not in your area and region, so really it's inconsequential for you, then it's fine, But if you really want to scale beyond where you are, and beyond what you do, you also have to think about a name that will be able to accommodate that. In a way, though at that time, the vision of what Youth 412 was going to be had not really been fully clear, in my mind, and all that, and well articulated. There was something, and I really believe that it must have been God, who pushed me towards this, because it would be able to not just be a podcast name, but an organization name. And I think that's part of the selling points I gave to the team, that this would not just be a podcast name, but it would be able to expand to more things in case we wanted to do more things. At the time, I did not know what we would do, or but it wouldn't just be limited to a podcast name. And there were two names that we had to choose from. There was another name that was suggested, which was the Dig, dig deeper in God. No, it was the Dig. That was the name of the podcast, Deeper in God. It was a good name. I really liked it. In fact, I was very nervous that they would choose that name over Youth for 12, particularly because it sounded very cool and fresh, and I thought people would resonate more with it. I really didn't think that Youth for 12 made as much sense, in terms of just saying it. But I think ultimately it won because it carried more meaning, and the whole idea of scale as well, that we could do so much more with it, that we wouldn't be limited to just being a podcast. And ultimately, today we're able to use that name for other areas of Youth for 12. We're able to do events, tours, and other sorts of things, because this name allowed us to scale. It did not limit us to just doing one thing, because above and beyond, we weren't just starting a podcast, we were starting a movement. So you also have to think about that. You're not just starting this, you're starting a movement. The podcast was just a vehicle for what we wanted to do. And that vehicle may change. You may add more vehicles and all that. But ultimately, we have a mission. And the name represented the mission above the function, So the function helps with giving clarity in terms of what you are, but if you want to scale, and you see your function as merely a vehicle for your mission, then that helps provide you with the clarity you need to be able to give a name that reflects your mission, your identity. And so even if the vehicles change, the name will remain the same, and you will continue to use this name, and this name will fit with whatever vehicle that you have, because it was founded from the mission. And so long as the mission remains the same, then the name will continue to be relevant. So yeah, but you can just tell me down in the comment section below, what are you building? What are you working on? And so on and so forth. I'd like to hear from you. And this is the start of the series, Building Youth for 12, and I hope that you enjoyed it.